means that the number one pick in the 2021 NBA draft goes to the Detroit Pistons.
Who's got the number one pick in this year's draft? Who's got the number one pick in this year's draft?
Basketball!
Select Isaiah Stewart.
The Detroit Pistons select Killian Hayes.
Sadiq, that was absolutely sensational.
I don't know what went into that process. I met the criteria to be selected, but I wasn't.
From long range. Oh! Yes!
Detroit basketball!
Pistons fans, welcome back to another edition of the Palace of Pistons Podcast here on the Believe Podcast Network. I'm your host for today, Jasper Apollonia, joined, of course, by Aaron Johnson. Aaron, how are you doing today?
Doing good, man. We got some good stuff to talk about. We got some interesting storylines with Jerami Grant and then the rest of the Pistons as we wind down on what has been an interesting and year of building for the Detroit Pistons. So excited to kind of talk about some overarching themes from the season as well as get into some specific players.
Yeah, Mike Angelano is not going to be joining us once again. I'm very sad to say, but he's left it in our, well, I was going to say capable hands, but our hands at least, Aaron. But the Pistons are not the only thing going on. As the NBA season is winding down, so is the NCAA season. And Aaron, we are 1 week away from the championship game. We're finally here. The top teams in college basketball have been determined and the Final Four is set. We're looking to wager on these games or the national championship. Head over to betonline.ag on your desktop or your mobile device to sign up for today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code BLEAV, B-L-E-A-V, to get started. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all updated odds and info, along with player props and new contests throughout the year. It's the best source for all your sports gambling needs, including live betting and everyone's favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started, so join today. Learn why everyone is saying BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Yeah, I mean, Aaron, I don't know about you. I got a couple bucks coming up on this next week. My Villanova versus UNC. That is Villanova versus Kentucky was originally my championship game. Kentucky did not do so well. Villanova still could pull it off though.
You're probably in a good spot because you at least have one of the teams left. I had Arizona and Gonzaga. I guess I'm basic, and like everyone else, those two teams both went down and did not advance. And so you're probably in a much better spot than most people because you still have at least one of your teams in it, and they have a chance to win the championship. I mean, Villanova plays a very good brand of basketball, which is expected every year out of Jay Wright in that team. And I know it's a little bit different this year. They don't really have like one of those guys like they have in years past, but they still just play the right brand of basketball. They have good,
no pun intended.
Play. I guess not, but they're a very good team. I could definitely see them winning. And hey, you and your betting hot streak that might be the start right there, as well as your Piston spread.
Yeah, I could have told you not to go for Arizona. I was happy they lost. My ex-girlfriend, one of my ex-girlfriends, she is dating a former Arizona great. I feel like I shouldn't say who it is. But, you know, just based on that alone, I had to root for Arizona to lose. So, yeah, I mean, look, hey, Aaron, the NBA season's winding down. NCAA season's winding down. And when the NBA season winds down, you know what happens, especially when it comes to losing teams? They start sitting their starters. And while other teams have been doing this actually for longer than the Pistons have doing, I'm looking at the Trailblazers. I'm looking at you, Oklahoma City, who, by the way, they had a all-time tanking matchup last night. That was incredible. Thank you, Isaiah Roby. 11 of 13 from the floor, 30 points. Got the Thunder over the top in OT. They are now 2 wins ahead of Detroit, which is huge for the Pistons' odds of getting the number 1 overall pick. But Detroit has finally gotten in on the action. Jerami Grant shut down for the rest of the season with a left calf strain. Aaron, he'd been playing so much better since he got back. You can see it in the overall numbers. He'd been struggling a little bit to start of the season, but he finishes the year with 19.2 points per game, 4.1 rebounds, 2.4 assists, and 1 block. So, Aaron, I have to ask you, do you think this was the right decision from the Pistons?
Yeah, I mean, this was definitely a decision that for the long term was probably the right decision to make. I mean, the Pistons have been playing much better with Jerami Grant, Cade Cunningham, and Saddiq Bey all healthy, along with some of their other reserve pieces, Kelly Olynyk, Killian Hayes, et cetera, et cetera. But they've been winning more basketball games, and they've been a lot more competitive. And that is a problem when you're at the back end of the season. You're already eliminated from the playoffs and the play-in, and you need more talent on the roster. It would have been tough for Detroit to continue to, win most of their ball games out of the last 7 to 10 games of the season, and lose their odds at a top 4 or 5 pick because they just kept winning basketball games. And so they make this decision, trying to stay within the bottom 3 teams so that they have the highest percentage of a chance at the number 1 pick when the lottery comes. So I do understand it from that point of view. On the flip side, it was very productive, I think, to see what the Pistons with the staples of their core as of now looked like playing together. And I think we saw the progression and the chemistry really start to grow between Grant, Cunningham, and Saddiq Bey. So from that standpoint, it's unfortunate because they didn't get enough time on the court this year to really gel when they were all healthy and settled in. And so it's disappointing that they didn't get the last, 8 games or whatever to continue to build on what they just started to really build following the trade deadline and the NBA All-Star break. So it's disappointing from that standpoint, but I definitely understand the decision to shut him down, especially if the knee soreness or the calf strain is actually an issue. I don't necessarily know that it is, but Grant did miss 24 games earlier in the season with having to have surgery on his thumb. So his health is obviously very important. He had already missed a large chunk of this year already. So getting him healthy, having him ready for next season where he enters what is currently the final year of his contract, he is eligible for up to a 4-year, $112 million contract extension this summer, but he does still have a year left on his original contract that he signed with Detroit back in the summer of 2020. So he needs to be healthy for next year. If the Pistons plan on keeping him, it's very important that he's a key cog on the roster, but he also needs to be healthy because there's also the talk that the Pistons still might be interested in trading him around the draft. There's been teams that have been interested before around the trade deadline. There are still teams interested now. The Portland Trailblazers were reported to be one of those teams a couple weeks ago. So Jerami Grant's health is very important, and it's probably best for the Pistons in terms of getting talent and giving themselves the best chance at getting talent that they shut him down so that they have a greater chance at losing games throughout the last 7 games of the year.
Oh man, Portland's interested. What Brandon Williams for Jerami Grant, straight up. I'm interested. Yeah, I mean, look, Aaron, we've talked about this all season, even before the season began, about Jerami Grant being thrown out there as a potential trade piece. And when the trade deadline came up, yes, there were a couple of schools of thought. You were in the school of thought of, no, they should not trade Jerami Grant. They're not going to get back a good enough return, and he's a good player. Well, now we're a little later on in the season, and Jerami Grant's initial issues with efficiency do seem like a thing of the past. Since he came back from those injuries, and I'm going to disregard the Washington game in this one just because he only played 7.5 minutes. But in those 22 other games since he came back from injury, Jerami Grant put up 19 points, 3.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, a steal, and a block per game. And this is the important aspect. He did this on 44% shooting from the field, 38% shooting from 3, and 42% shooting from the free throw line. So his efficiency took a big jump once he came back and became more of that 2.5 third scorer. He and Saddiq Bey kind of splitting those secondary scoring duties behind Cade Cunningham. So my question to you, Aaron, is, having seen Jerami Grant come back and effectively slot in as like a 2B, 3A kind of option on offense, are you still of the belief that they should not trade Jerami Grant? Or do you see now that he's come back and obviously rehabbed his trade value a little bit? Do you think the Pistons should, of course, if the price is right, move on from Jerami Grant? Or should they keep him and hopefully extend it?
Yeah, I think the goal right now should be to extend Jerami Grant. He's had just such a nice turnaround to his season since he was able to get healthy and settle in, and it helped that he had other guys get healthy and settle in around him, specifically Cade Cunningham. And then the Pistons got more healthy around him with guys coming back from injury like Kelly Olynyk, and they got an improved version of Isaiah Stewart over the last 30 or so games of the year. So I think he fits in very well with this team. I like the talk of him as a 2A, 2B kind of guy alongside Sadiq Bey. If those two guys are good enough to be 2A and 2B, is Cade Cunningham good enough to be the number one guy? And I think as of now, I think the way that they've played this year, especially considering that they're going to have a chance at a top 3 pick, or a top 4 pick, a top 5 pick, and getting one of these guys that can come in and also contribute, whether it's a dynamic scoring guard like Jaden Ivey, or it's a guy that looks very comfortable scoring the basketball in Paolo Banchero. It could be Chet. It could be Jabari Smith. Like, they're going to get another talented player that's going to be able to come in and contribute. And so they're going to be a team that's ready to aim for the playoffs next year. And Jerami Grant is one of the few guys on this roster that has playoff experience. He played for a very good system and a very good team in Denver. And that's the kind of guy that you need on your roster. You cannot have a roster that doesn't have guys with playoff experience, doesn't have veterans that, have that type of level of play. There's a difference between having, and I know I've said this before, there's a difference between having a veteran like Jared Dudley back when he was with the Brooklyn Nets on the back end of his career, wasn't really a valuable player, but a good guy to have in the locker room. But you need veterans that can also play big minutes and really contribute to a team. And that's what Jerami Grant can be. All of the returns on him in this post All-Star break have been very, very solid. And I think Detroit should absolutely be looking to extend him if they can agree to a number. I don't know if it's the max 4-year, $112 million deal. I don't know if the Pistons are maybe trying to get him to around $20 million. Maybe they don't want to go above $20 million. But you're splitting hairs at that point because it's only another $2-3 million, another or each year at that point when you're talking about the max type of contract that he can get. On the flip side, if the Pistons do get that holy grail type offer where they can add another top pick and maybe there's a prospect coming back too, like if there's a team that is really willing to do that and is desperate enough to get a player like Jerami Grant that they're willing to give up a couple major pieces, then I guess Detroit has to really look at that and consider it. And I don't know if there's going to be, and I don't expect there to be a team that will make that type of offer. I guess if Portland really, really does like Jerami Grant and really wants to get him alongside Dame to take another shot at competing next season, then maybe they have something. But I just don't see it right now. So I think this is setting up for Jerami Grant to return to the Pistons next year, whether that be on a new contract or playing on the final year of his original contract. We will see.
Well, Aaron, we said something similar in regards to Jerami Grant deals with the Bulls when it comes to like the Portland discussion, where there was kind of a thing where like, well, okay, they're all in. They kind of have to trade for Jerami Grant, right? And that's the thing with like Portland. You look at that roster and you sort of go, well, what are they going to do? They're just going to waste, the last great years of Dame's career? No, they kind of have to go for it. Well, maybe they don't. I don't know. I think a lot of it will come down to whether they get that Pelicans pick if for, the CJ McCollum deal. If they do get that pick that transfers to them as part of that, that would be a big, big boon for them in terms of making an offer to the Pistons. Because if you can throw another lottery pick at Detroit and possibly you're also giving up, I don't know, like a Naz Little or something like that could potentially sway Detroit to making that deal. I don't know. But yeah, I think you're right. Look, it's going to be difficult to replace Jerami Grant's production on this team. And it's going to be difficult to replace the things that he brings. Like you said, that playoff experience, that real veteran leadership. There's a lot of NBA veterans out there on rosters, but not all of those NBA veterans are the type of ones you want to have on your roster. You know what I mean? It's like, look, Aaron, a ton of people take multivitamins, but it's important to choose one that's top quality, right? Just like your NBA veterans. Well, with one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to start your day right. Notice I didn't stumble over the word adaptogens, unlike you or Mike. I just want to point that out. Their special blend of ingredients supports gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. It's lifestyle friendly, and it fits a wide range of diets. There's only 1 gram of sugar and no chemicals or artificial anything. Reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop of water. It's 1 scoop and a cup of water every day. That's it. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/believe. That's BLEAV. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/believe. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Athletic Greens. Take ownership of your health.
I was going to give you a compliment on how well you did, but then I caught a stray, and now I don't want to give you a compliment. And now I just kind of want to move on after that, because I don't even know if I want to finish out the show. Like, maybe you should just kind of do it by yourself, I guess. Like,
look, man, things get real. Things get real when adaptogens enter the group chat, man. People, you take people's adaptogens away from them and they start going crazy. I'm sorry. I just, I couldn't help but notice Mike had a hard time with it. You had a hard time with it. I knew that I was going to be hosting this week. I made sure to practice in advance. I had my flashcards. I'm just saying,
Guess I got to get my reading comprehension skills up. Geez.
That's work. Hard work wins when, or hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. That's all I'm saying, Aaron. That's all I'm saying. All
right, Instagram motivational post.
Yeah, that's right. You can find me on my inspirational quotes Instagram. Well, Aaron, okay. So we've been talking a little bit about Jerami Grant. Jerami Grant was a guy that I think would probably be part of the discussion coming up next if he hadn't come back and played so well for these last 22, 23 games or so. Aaron, not everyone has played great. Obviously, Saddiq Bey has improved this year, even if the underlying numbers don't quite look like it. Cade Cunningham has been fantastic. Jerami Grant has come back and given actually better than last year's efficiency on pretty good scoring. He's shown that he can fit into a different role. But not everybody's played great on the Pistons this year, Aaron, and they certainly wouldn't be in the position they're in if they had. So my question to you is, which players have been the most disappointing for Detroit this season in your eyes?
I think you have to start with Killian Hayes.
I was hoping you weren't going to say him, but I knew you were.
I'm sorry. I have to. It has to be talked about. Just the sheer numbers alone. There wasn't much progression this year. The shooting numbers leave so much to be desired. We know he can distribute the basketball, but his minutes are pretty much the same. He's averaging 24.7 minutes per game this season compared to 25.8 last year. Of course, he only played 26 games last season. So last season wasn't really a great look at him. This year we got a deeper look at him, and the numbers, the play just hasn't all been there. The flashes are certainly there with Killian Hayes. You see it at times where he's buzzing on defense. He shows a flash at the rim on offense where he just takes the ball and finally goes at the cup and scores. And he's capable of doing that, but he doesn't do it enough. And the shooting numbers have not progressed. He's shot worse from the 3-point line this year. His free throw percentage is down almost 6%. So it just hasn't been a good enough season for Killian Hayes to do what the hope was of this year, which was show that him and Cade Cunningham are the backcourt of the future for the Pistons. I mean, that was one of the most prominent storylines, not just in the Pistons community, but in general. Like NBA people were talking about, well, if the Pistons draft Cade Cunningham, they spent the 7th pick in last year's draft on Killian Hayes, who's also a guard. How does that mesh? And will they be able to? And I know that I was saying, and I'm pretty sure you said the same, these two guys can play together. They have the potential to be one of the better defensive duos in backcourts in the league. You expect to see a leap from Killian Hayes offensively, and there just hasn't been that this year. There have also been, and I don't know if this is bad luck or what, but Killian Hayes just tends to get hurt every 2 or 3 games in some sort of way, whether it's the hand, the hip, the ankle. It's been a problem for him this year as well. He's missed, 15, 20 games throughout the season. But I just haven't seen enough out of Killian Hayes. And this is coming from a guy that was very, very high on him before he was drafted by Detroit. So it's been a really disappointing year. The flashes are certainly there, but they just have not been consistent enough. They haven't stayed around enough, and he hasn't stayed healthy enough to build on those flashes. So he's definitely the guy that first comes to mind when thinking about disappointing seasons on the year for Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are definitely has been improvement from Killian Hayes this year. You can see it on the floor. He's gotten better at taking care of the ball. He's gotten better defensively. I think even over these last few games, you've seen increased aggressiveness from him and increased ability and desire to score. But in the words of the immortal Scott Steiner, the numbers don't lie, and they spell disaster. Look, he's averaging less points, less assists, less minutes. He's shooting worse from 3, if that was even freaking possible. And guess what? He's also now started missing free throws more regularly. He's down to like 75% from the free throw line. He's been really bad, actually, from the free throw line since he went to the bench. So it feels like there's always something with Killian. Like you said, he's like, yeah, he comes back and he has a couple good games, and then he's hurt. I think that game against Atlanta was a great example of it, where he was so good for the whole game, and then they go to OT, and then just a dumb freak injury happens, and he's out for the rest of the game. And it's just like, man, even when he's playing well, you can't count on it. It's really disappointing. But I don't want to steal your thunder, Aaron. I think for me, I'd have to go with another guy that came in here, somebody that I was not super high on coming in. And maybe I changed my opinion a little bit, but I still kind of do feel the same way, that if they had spent this money in free agency on Rashawn Holmes, they'd be in a much better place. Discounting everything that's going on with him potentially legally, that guy is got to be Kelly Olynyk for me. He came in and there was a lot of talk that he might even be starting over Isaiah Stewart. If you remember, we really thought that he was going to be the starting center, and boy, he has just not played well this year at all. He's not shooting well. He's only shooting 33% from outside. He's not even particularly shooting well from 2. He's actually shooting his lowest percentage from 2-point range as he has since his rookie year in Boston. Second lowest points per game of his career. He's averaging 2.6 assists, and he's doing okay in the rebounding department, but he has not been good defensively. He has not been good shooting the ball. I'd have to say Kelly Olynyk for me, for a guy that they're paying $13 million per year on average, has been a huge disappointment, Aaron. He has simply not solidified the front court in the way that he needed to. And you look at somebody like Marvin Bagley, who came in and simply by dunking has represented a huge improvement over both Kelly Olynyk and Trey Lyles.
Yeah, I think that's very, very fair to say. And I was definitely not in love with the acquisition in the offseason to bring him in. I thought it was a lot of money to give him. And I definitely think him getting hurt played a factor, because Kelly Olynyk by no means is a fast-paced NBA player, but he's been even slower since coming back from the ankle injury. And then he got COVID, which he said was not easy for him. So I think those two things have also hindered what has been a disappointing year for him, but it also makes it a problem going into next season to where I don't know if Detroit can really count on him to play a role. I think in theory they would like to. I mean, they're paying him $12 million a year, but Marvin Bagley deserves a contract extension. I posed a question on Twitter. A lot of people said around $10 million a year is what they would be comfortable paying Marvin Bagley, or what they think his type of contract will look like in the offseason. I think that's maybe a topic that we can discuss more next week. But I think if you slot him in for a spot, you slot Jerami Grant in for a spot in the front court, and you spot Isaiah Stewart in, then if Detroit ends up with another big in the draft or a forward, a guy like Paolo or Chet or Jabari, really any of the top three guys, where does a Kelly Olynyk fit in?
He doesn't. He doesn't. That's the thing. If you're drafting a power forward, if you're drafting Chet, if you're drafting Paolo, I think even if you're drafting Smith, like I think if you're drafting Jabari Smith, I don't think Kelly Olynyk has a place on this roster next year. If you're taking a big with your first overall pick, or even if you're taking a big, so if you're taking like Jalen Duren, and let's say they trade Jerami Grant, that's the only way you can keep him is if you trade Jerami Grant. But then if you bring in someone like Jalen Duren, like where really is the space for Kelly Olynyk? Because I don't want to see more of those Bagley Stewart minutes. Do you?
This year I kind of want to continue to see him. I don't know if I want to count it out overall.
Okay.
You have to believe in one of them in developing a jump shot. I think it's easier to see Bagley doing it because he's the one that's more willing to shoot the ball outside of the paint. I think you need one of them obviously to be able to space the floor.
I mean them playing together. I mean like Stewart and Bagley as a lineup, as a front court lineup. You're okay with that? Really?
Not as I don't want him as my starting front court, but I think throughout the game, I'd be fine with Bagley coming in off the bench and playing a couple minutes alongside Stewart. Okay. I mean, I definitely want to see a bigger sample size. The return has not necessarily been great yet, but I think it would help if one of them was able to space the floor offensively. The problem is covering up Bagley's mishaps
defensive issues.
Okay,
so let me rephrase that. Okay, let's say that those are both Stewart and Bagley are on your bench next year. Is there any room for Kelly Olynyk then on this team?
No.
Okay.
Wait, man, I don't want to. This is definitely a topic we can get into more next week. But who's the starting center in that scenario?
Yeah, I mean that's the point. Like, let's just say you have Jerami Grant back and you drafted Chet, or you bring in DeAndre Ayton and you drafted, Paolo. There's a lot of ways you could go because don't forget if they renounce that. But that's also the problem there. And maybe we should get into this another week because they renounce Marvin Bagley. That gives them a lot more money on the table in order to bring in potential free agents. I believe they do need to renounce Marvin Bagley in order to have max space available. So we should get into that another time. But
yeah, you just shot like 7 different hypotheticals through my mind.
I know. That's on me. My point is
Isaiah Stewart, Chet Holmgren pairing and figuring out how that would work.
My point is, like, for the money he's getting paid, I do not really see a path to Kelly Olynyk having a role on this team next year that is anything other than like third, like your fifth big man or guy that you're like trying to offload the entire season.
Yeah, and if Kelly Olynyk was making $6 million a year, like it wouldn't be great, but it'd be fine if that was your situation because guys are going to miss games and they'll still end up playing half the season or whatever. But paying him $12 million, I know, the next year that it's $12 million, and the year after that it's a team option so they can cut their ties. But still, and the Pistons do have, the cap space where it doesn't really matter right now. But at the same time, just like in principle, it's not a good thing to be paying what looks like is going to be your fifth big in the rotation, $12 million a season. So yeah, that's an interesting decision that Detroit's going to have to make. And I think that's why this draft is so important. This draft could really shape up to change the landscape of how this roster is built. And if they get a big, what happens to Olynyk? What happens to Jerami Grant? I think those are things that, are interesting storylines that really are going to play a factor this summer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are so many moving pieces with this roster. And like you said, I threw like 7 hypotheticals at you, but the thing is, all of those hypotheticals are incredibly, they're not just like possible, they're probable. there's a good chance that Jerami Grant's getting moved, but there's also a good chance that, you're getting a high draft pick. There's also a good chance that Jerami Grant gets moved. There's so many moving parts here, and how Troy Weaver decides to play this offseason, how he reacts to all the things that are going on with this organization and with the draft. I think it's going to be key. It's going to make a huge, huge difference in the future of this franchise. I think one of the things you see with a lot of championship contending teams is that the window, it opens and closes a lot faster than you think. It's one of those things where there's one offseason where you go, this is a big offseason, but there's other off seasons. And then you look back at it in 5 years and you go, oh no, that was the offseason. You actually didn't have a chance at any other point. This was the one where you absolutely had to hit it. I think of, say, like those mid 2000s or like late aughts New York Knicks teams, when they could have actually had something if they had been able to get one of James, Bosch, or Wade, but they weren't able to. And after that, they just completely fell apart. That was their one chance. And it does feel like the Pistons are coming up to that kind of crossroads here where they're going to have to make and nail some really important decisions coming up here. I don't know if you feel the same way, Aaron. I know that they're still relatively like early on in the rebuild, but I think they're actually a lot further on than a lot of other people do. And they are going to have to really, really lose these next couple games and make some really, really smart decisions this offseason.
I 100% agree with you. I don't know if the Pistons are necessarily there yet, but the clock started ticking as soon as they drafted Cade Cunningham. You have to put a winning team around your young guys, your pieces that you're building with soon. We see it, now more than ever with the power that players have to force their way off of teams and to specific markets. Like, it is important that the Pistons don't take next year as another season. They just try to build something and see what happens. Like, they need to be spending this offseason, this draft, getting the right pieces around their guy in Cade Cunningham and putting themselves in a position to be a playoff team next year, to take that leap that the Cleveland Cavaliers took this year. So it's a big offseason for Detroit. I don't think you can look at it any other way. I think the way it looks right now, if the Pistons aren't fighting for a playoff spot next year, that's certainly disappointing. And I don't know if they can afford to not be competing for a playoff spot. Just with the way the league is nowadays, and it's not a referendum on any of these guys that force their ways out of markets. And, I don't know if necessarily Cade fits the bill as one of those guys. From everything we've seen, he is very supportive and is very happy of his place here in Detroit. But it still would be disappointing, especially with the other guys on the roster. Like, we've seen Saddiq Bey take a leap. They have Jerami Grant. They're going to have a top pick. They have money to spend. Like, if they can't get the right guys, if, there's another situation where next year you have a Corey Joseph or a veteran like that who should be maybe a bench player starting for you and playing 25 minutes a game. Like,
oh no,
if they're doing that again next year, that is a problem because they're wasting time when they should be winning, then when they're capable of winning and when they have the means to start winning.
Yeah, it's going to be crucial for Troy Weaver too, because I've seen him put together assortments of talent. Like, we've seen him put together teams of guys that are perhaps undervalued, perhaps overlooked, looking for a second chance, looking for a start to their career. Somebody like Frank Jackson, somebody like Marvin Bagley, great examples there. But we haven't seen him put together a team that is designed to win, a team that is designed to be cohesive and work together where all the parts are part of a whole. I haven't seen that from him yet. And this is going to be the offseason where I'm going to need to see, how does Troy Weaver really build a roster? Because I don't feel like we've seen it yet. I feel like we've seen a random assortments of talent. I don't think we've seen a team in Detroit under Troy Weaver. And this is going to be the offseason where he's going to have to start showing I know I threw that money at Kelly Olynyk, but the next person I throw money at is actually going to, contribute. That's what I need to see. I can't have him just throwing money at veterans to be like, oh, this guy's good for the locker room. Oh, this guy deserves a second shot. I need it to be focused. And we'll see. This is the offseason where it's really going to start coming together. And it's going to be crucial that they lose tonight's game against the Nets, which I will be going to. I'm excited to see Cade in person for the first time. But yeah, that's all about it for me, Aaron. I don't know. Do you have anything else that you're looking forward to for these last few? I believe we have 7 games left in this season. Anything you're anticipating?
Nothing that really stands out. I mean, hopefully we'll see someone like Isaiah Livers, who was out with a concussion, but practiced yesterday. Hopefully we'll see him get back in the mix a little bit. It's really unfortunate. I know we mentioned it last week, but Chris Smith out for the rest of the year. He had to have a procedure done. Hamidou Diallo is out for the remainder of the season as well. So I would have liked to seen him get a little bit more time on the court, because he's another guy that's essentially a forward at this point. He's a 4 at this point.
Yeah. That's a good point.
In the mix for minutes next season. So I would have liked to seen those two guys, and Livers and Smith are both forwards, the 3-4 guys that could be vying for minutes as well next year. So we got to see a little bit of Chris Smith in the G League, and I really liked what I saw from him down there. Obviously, Isaiah Livers has had a couple of nice moments up in the NBA in the few games that he's been out there. But I don't know what next year is going to look like, but we've got a lot to talk about once we get to the off season, because the Pistons have definitely some key roster decisions to make. But we'll see what happens with Killian Hayes, Cade, as he tries to make one last push for the Rookie of the Year award. Hopefully we can see some more out of those guys. And Saddiq Bey, he's had a couple rough offensive games since he went for 51 and then 25 the next game. He's been pretty quiet ever since. So hopefully, these young guys can finish out the season strong and leave a foundation to build upon heading into next season.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think Cade's winning Rookie of the Year. I think he's putting it together right at the right time. I think these last couple weeks, I think it's going to push him over the top, especially now that Mobley's been falling off a little bit and not everybody's bought into Scotty Barnes. I think like the Scotty Barnes, Franz Wagner votes are kind of going to split themselves. I do think Cade's going to end up walking away. And I was not convinced a couple weeks ago. I think he's getting it now with his play as of late. Aaron, man, we got a lot of stuff coming up. It is kind of crazy that a team this bad can have so much happening around them, isn't it? It's kind of shocking.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's never the NBA season for really every team is now year round. Like there's never really a break anymore, because you have the draft right away. You have the lottery, then you have the draft, then you have summer league, you have free agency. Like there's that couple weeks in August, beginning of September, where it's quiet. But nowadays we have, that's a point in time where a all-star level player decides they want out, and then that's the storyline heading up to the start of the preseason, and then we're off. So it's kind of become the norm nowadays, I guess.
Yeah, and you know what? Something tells me we will discuss the Pistons' future rotations again, especially Kelly Olynyk. And thank you for bringing up Isaiah Livers, because you know what? I think he's going to have to probably be part of that forward rotation discussion going into next year as well. He, to me, has definitely shown that he's got definitely a flash of something there. And Chris Smith, another guy as well. So a lot of moving parts with this team, a lot of moving parts going into the offseason. It's going to be fascinating. Pistons have only, I believe, like I said, 7 games left, including a must lose against the Oklahoma City Thunder. If you lose that Oklahoma City game, you've basically locked yourself into a top 3 pick. That's going to be a huge loss for either team that gets it. But we will talk about that next week. I believe they are playing on the 1st, so that will be part of next week's discussion. Aaron, that's all I have for this week. Anything else from you?
No, I'm good to go, man. Good stuff as always. A pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Always happy to talk to you. Hopefully we will have Mike Angolano back for you in the next coming weeks. We, as always, wish him the best. For Aaron Johnson and our not here host, Mike Angolano, I'm Jasper Apollonia. Please remember to check us out on Twitter, as well as Palace of Pistons. For Aaron Johnson, I'm Jasper Apollonia. We will see you next time on the Palace of Pistons podcast, brought to you by Believe and Bet Online.